Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Anviti Connect. I am Dr. Tanvi Parkar. I'm a part of the health risk management team at Anviti. We provide subject matter expertise for end-to-end management of employee health risk. The COVID-19 pandemic is here to stay. Now, however, the lockdown's getting over, and all the operations are beginning again. But there are still a lot of unanswered questions regarding the infection, the virus, and then there is a lot of questions that once I start going to office, what would happen if it happens to me, and maybe how will I be able to protect myself? And now this has fueled the people's hypochondria, or should I say, the anxiety of getting ill and infected. And therefore, today we bring to you a session on the most frequently asked questions on COVID 19 and beyond that. Now, to answer our questions, we have with us Dr. Amit Saraf, who's the Director of Internal Medicine and DNB Coordinator at Jupiter Hospital. We welcome you, Dr. Saraf.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Before we begin, I shall request all the participants to write their questions through or send their questions to the Q&A section only, which you will see in the floating panel below. Let's begin. Dr. Saraf, could you just tell us a little bit about the virus? I mean, what's its virulence? What is the fatality rates? Anything about just the virus, because that's people do not know about that.
Right. So let's talk a little. See, these are respiratory viruses. As everybody has learned, they come into the family of the SARS. So that's severe acute respiratory syndrome kind of viruses. They belong to the same family. So I would want to draw the attention of everybody that when the ancient caveman was there, and even when the common cold virus for the first time must have affected the ancient world at that time, it must have caused a lot of unfortunate mortality and morbidity. But today we don't see any sort of mortality and morbidity from common cold virus. That is because it is here in the society for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and we've all developed immunity towards it. So that same common cold virus belongs to the same family of the SARS virus, and this one is also the novel coronavirus 19. The word 19 comes from the fact that it was discovered in 2019. China declared it to the world in December 2019 that they have unfortunately a new virus in the air. So it's an RNA virus. RNA virus. To give a little background to the participant of viruses in medical textbooks, a virus is defined as an entity which is almost bordering on living and non-living. So it's such a ubiquitous organism that it is known to survive through hardly any little nutrition, almost like environments where probably any other living organism may not really be able to survive. And there are two kinds of viruses, DNA virus and the RNA, which is the actual nucleic acid which makes up the cell molecule. So this one is the RNA virus, and it has spikes on its surface. And these spikes are known to then adhere to a particular area on the human cell, which is called a receptor. And that's how it tries to enter the human cell. And once it enters, so the virus is any virus, including this now COVID-19, is then known to use the resources at hand in the human cell to then sort of multiply itself to draw nutrition from the human cell. So in other words, it acts like a parasite to the host cells and starts using the host cells mechanism, the machinery, the nutrients inside to replicate and to multiply. So that's what is COVID-19. It is a novel coronavirus, also known to the world.
All right. Thank you so much for that explanation. I think that's like, the first time probably people must be listening to what exactly is the virus. So, sir, how does this virus spread? And, there's a lot of fear because of this virus, because if they say that, asymptomatic people also are able to spread, how are asymptomatic people going to spread the virus? So, I mean, is it a valid fear, or, how does it exactly spread?
Right. So as the family name goes, the respiratory virus. So these viruses obviously then supposedly spread only through respiratory system. So if somebody is coughing or sneezing, that is how the virus is propelled into the air. And then from there, anybody who's close to that person can inhale the same kind of air. And then that the virus can then sort of take a seeding into the lung. So the spread as of now, especially on COVID-19, is through respiratory air. Remember, whatever I'm saying today is after knowledge of this virus of only 6 months. You and me and the entire world has known this virus only since December 2019. So the researchers, the scientists, all of us require at least a year or two till we break down, dissect out any organism in its toto and get complete information. So whatever I'm saying this afternoon may change a little, not too much, because already a lot of research has gone into this virus in the last 6 months. But as of today, it is known to transmit only through air droplets. We inhale them, and that's how we can acquire them. Coming to what Dr. Parker asked about asymptomatic people, so how can I say this? The human body develops symptoms only when the immune system fails to sort of control the infection. So for example, this afternoon, I may be harboring dengue virus in my body, but I may not be developing symptoms of dengue as of this afternoon because my immunity may be enough to counter, kill, or even stop the replication of dengue virus. The moment I develop symptoms, fever starts, chill starts, that means my immunity is falling short to control dengue virus on its own. And that's where the body is now complaining a little. We have headaches and body pains and chills. That is a point where the number of viruses in the human body have reached to a point where they are multiplying much more than what is which the body can control. And that is a time when symptoms start. So there are two phases I'm trying to describe: asymptomatic phase and a symptomatic phase. Asymptomatic phase is when the virus particles in the human body are too little to cause symptom. The human body and the immunity is holding it down. And the symptomatic phase is when too many virus particles have built up by multiplication, and therefore the symptoms start. So that means asymptomatic people, a person say having 100 virus particles in his system, is also able to shed the virus, and somebody having 10,000 virus particles in his system is also able to shed the virus. But then the person who's asymptomatic, who's just having 100 viruses in his system of COVID-19 or any other virus, will be able to then shed very little amount of viruses through his nose
Yeah.
and mouth because he's harboring very little. Whereas who's completely symptomatic and absolutely ill and not doing well because his body is overwhelmed by those many thousands of virus particles, is then shedding a lot more. So though it is true that an asymptomatic person can also transmit, remember the transmission rate by an asymptomatic person is much lesser compared to
All
a
right.
symptomatic person.
Okay. All right. So, sir, then coming to the point that there's a lot of speculation, like, should I even order something from Amazon? Can I handle the package? Or just, so there are some lot of people anxious about buying vegetables and then dry it in the sun for like 2 days till they are dried. And then, for non-veg food products, if I eat it, I will get coronavirus and I'll get infected. Can you elaborate the sustainability of this virus on surfaces?
So as I said in the beginning, it spreads through respiratory system. So the best way to not acquire the virus is stop breathing. Has that point sunk in? I mean, in the way I'm trying to say it, without any smile or any sort of being sort of jovial about it.
True.
Right in the beginning, Dr. Parker mentioned an extremely important point in the opening statement that the paranoia exists about this particular infection. So, at this point, let me make it very clear that whatever has been told to people by corporation, by the authorities, by doctors, unfortunately, human behavior is such that we don't do the things we are told. We try to do things or try to find out things which are actually not really required or essential. For example, in this meeting, from this morning, I would want to ask if we are told to wear a mask, to wash your hands frequently, to exercise every single day, have nutrients in the form of almond walnuts and fruits and vegetables and salads and sunlight. I would really want to know whether any of us have done all of the above since today morning. So rather than doing that, the human tendency is that can I do this, can I not do this, and do that, and do this and do more. So more than you, the researchers are more interested in finding out whether the parcels obtained from outside of market will contain the virus or the vegetables carry it. So up till now, if there is no authentic scientific evidence on that only means that what please as of now do what is advocated. This is maybe a source, maybe the food, maybe something else, then immediately the information is percolated. And percolation of information, remember, is from authentic scientific website like CDC, Center of Disease Control US, WHO, World Health Organization, ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research, not WhatsApp University. WhatsApp is a source of entertainment, not information at all. So if you want authentic information, you should go on to these websites, and if they do not tell you that drying your vegetables out in the sun honestly does not really do much to the virus, it does not do much to the virus. Handling stuff from Amazon or deliveries, you should obviously handle them, but then after handling them, do you really spend 20 seconds in washing your hands? That is what is essential. So should not be paranoid about it, should be cautious about it.
Sure, no, sir. So, sir, then what are the symptoms of next common question is that what are the symptoms that I should be looking at? So tomorrow, if I have a cough and cold and simple, how different is it from a common cold, or should I just go and get myself tested? So, what are the symptoms basically that I want to look at, or the red flags?
Right. So red flags is the ideal word which we should be sort of trying to understand. So as I said in the beginning, it's a respiratory virus, so it will cause respiratory symptoms. So cough, fever, sore throat, basically all are the symptoms of COVID-19. And as everybody here knows, these are the symptoms of common cold as well. So if you ask me what's the differentiation, there is none. These are viruses belonging to the same family. So in the same family, it's like imagine, for example, a particular Zoshi family may look all the same because they are Zoshis. A particular Thakkar family may all look the same because they are Thakkars. So it's a respiratory virus. It's bound to follow its innate sort of properties and behave like its other respiratory viruses. So there is no real symptomatology which is different. But as she rightly said, the red flags can be raised. So red flags basically include, for example, you have upper respiratory sore throat, fever, cough, and then you take the usual things of a little of paracetamol, little of steaming, little of gargling, and you notice that in some time, 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, the symptoms are not abating. That can be first red flag. Number two, what has been found out specifically about COVID-19, that breathlessness is a symptom which normally a common cold will not cause. So, uh, overt breathless, you're trying to go to the washroom, you're trying to just move around in the house and you're breathless, that it can be a red flag again. And third, what even in the H1N1 epidemic we learned, and even now this particular epidemic is telling us that the vulnerable subsets have to be very, very careful. So those include elderly people beyond 60 years of age, a pregnant woman for that matter, a cancer survivor, uncontrolled diabetic, people whose immunity is less for some reason. So in them, if there is an upper respiratory symptom, it's rather prudent that they seek medical attention as soon as possible.
All right, sir. So then, in a view of, the operations in offices being started, and, now tomorrow maybe I have to start going to office, but suddenly maybe one fine day I have fever, high grade fever, and, then what is the process like, the healthcare access process that I should be taking, in this whole scenario?
So, firstly, about the office. So, first point is soon the lockdown seems to be opening up little by little, and work will start. So, one point is this is not my observation. I don't belong to the field, but I have friends in the IT industry, school friends actually, and he made a very valid point when I spoke to him a few weeks back that India was harboring 4G for some years now, and since the lockdown, 4G network have been overwhelmed. I mean, all of us, for whatever reason, entertainment reason, professional reasons, whatever reason, the entire country has hooked onto internet as of now. And there was not a single episode of servers getting overloaded, servers collapsing. So for the first time, we as a country have realized that the 4G network is so robust and so strong that we can hold video conferences, we can work from home, we can do so many things which honestly we weren't doing because we hadn't realized the potential of internet and 4G network. So the first loud and clear message is that from here onwards, right from forget COVID-19, from the environmental point of view also, if certain things professionally especially can be done from home, they should be advocated. That's one. Two, where it is essential to step out and work, obviously to the office area as you should, but then the adhering or the simple facts of social distancing. So social distancing, a single point here, why 6 feet and why not more? Because when a human sort of sneezes or coughs, the amount of spread of the droplet is known to be in the range of 3 meters, that is 6 feet, not more than that. So the droplet then can fall within the diameter of 6 feet of that person, and therefore it's safe to sort of keep a distance of 6 feet. So you're beyond that diameter to acquiring infection. So when you step out, social distancing. Thirdly, luckily, even today in most of our country and most of our public transports are still open air ventilation. We don't have all the buses which are AC or all the trains which are AC. Most of there are open air ventilation. So that is working. If you see the European countries, they are in fact right now opening up the vents in their public transport, so allow fresh air to come in. So that really works for India as of now. So that will work. And lastly, once you're in office, then adhering to the usual norms of mask all the time whenever you're out of the house, frequent hand washing with soap and water. Need not always be sanitizers. Again, you don't need not have to go to the chemist and buy all the costly sanitizers. Simple soap and water honestly works the best compared to any alcohol sanitizer. Sneezing into your elbow or into a tissue paper and disposing it, coughing into that similarly is to be adhered, and keeping socializing to a little lesser extent in these days are the measures somebody should adhere once they're in an office environment.
Okay. So when should one seek hospitalization or medical care or a test, and what's the difference between, say, a quarantine center or a COVID care center and a hospital then, those are other questions that we get very
Right.
frequently.
So primarily today, even for doctors, for us, it's a new normal. Uh, there was a time, just I mean, I not even too many years ago, 6 months prior, if somebody called me up of cough, cold, and fever. Even I could advocate the grandmother remedies of steam it out, gargle it out, have some soup, rest it out, and you'll be fine. But today, with COVID-19, with common cold and fever, what I do as a person is first adhere to a new normal, that is teleconsultation, which has known to work. The Medical Council of India has allowed this one kind of consultation today. So it's a good video consult. You can see your patient at time, just ask him to open the mouth, can try to visualize his throat. He can talk to you, you can talk to him. And wherever a doctor sees a red flag in the conversation, then he will ask for a physical consult or he'll ask for tests to be done. And with those, obviously, a physical follow up or a physical consult to be done. That's step number one. Step number two, if at all this patient himself or herself feels the symptoms are not right or the red flags are there, then remember, none of the hospitals I have known have ever stopped. Whatever we read in the papers that the casualties have shut down and emergencies, I may understand that certain outpatients and OPDs may have shut down for some reason, but the emergencies were always open. I, as a person, I'm working this afternoon. I'm talking to you from an emergency room when I have to get back to work in last time. So if you have red flags, you should get back to get to an emergency room of any hospital and get yourself evaluated. And from there, again, if tests are required, they will be sent, and depending upon the reports, you will be treated. So, quarantine centers, then, if a report comes positive for COVID-19, so quarantine center is, imagine a big house, as simple as that. You are kept in a setup where it's a very stable setup, a very stable patient, not requiring any oxygen, just quarantine because for some reason, if your home isolation is not as per the scientific method, that means you don't have a room to yourself, don't have open air ventilation in the room, you're sharing a common toilet, don't have an independent toilet to your own, then it's rather prudent that you come to a quarantine center and you're kept there for quarantine, and then once you're asymptomatic or better, you're sent back home. That's a quarantine center for you. COVID care is one step above a quarantine center where all of the above, along with oxygen, a little of intravenous support is given. So that's where so quarantine center can be asymptomatic to mildly symptomatic people. COVID care can be mildly symptomatic to moderately symptomatic people, patients. And then a hospital, obviously, COVID hospital is a step up where moderate to severe patients who require hospitalization, observation, unfortunate ICU admissions are the ones which are then shifted to a COVID hospital.
Alright, so thank you for the clarification. That's a very good clarification. So we get a lot of questions about the difference between these. Now, sir, there's also different types of tests. There are antibody tests, there are PCR tests, and so there's a confusion which one should we do, which one is applicable for which.
Right.
What would you tell them?
I would first tell them to just listen to the doctor because honestly, it's not your cup of tea to understand. See, I'm not a lawyer, for example. If I have a medical legal case tomorrow and I start nitpicking the brains of my lawyer that what does this law mean and that subsection means and this mean, at one point he'll tell me, just allow me to do my job and trust me and I'll do it the best for you. So I'll explain everything you've asked me on this question, but then it's going to be Greek and Latin to a lot of people there, but I'll try to make it very simple. So basically, when a virus enters the human body, that's called an antigen. And when the human body develops a defense system against the virus, that's called an antibody. So you have two kinds of predominant tests. One testing for the virus, which is an antigen test, which is your RT-PCR and your reverse transcript test and your Western blot. And you have a immunoglobulin or antibody test. So in simple words, the lab is either trying to find out or isolate the virus in your bloodstream, or sorry, in your swabs, or it's trying to find out the antibody towards the virus. These are the two broad categories of the laboratory test. But then leave it to the better judgment of your healthcare worker to recommend the best test for you, because there are many tests, and we pick and choose what is the best for the person sitting across. It's not a generalized formula that what one test for everybody. It doesn't really work that way. Those tests are also there. Those are called screening tests, where they use for mass population to quickly screen a huge number and then try to segregate them in positives and negatives. But specific tests we keep for specific person who is sitting across to you on a consultation table.
Sure. Sir, so then are there any, so there are a lot of speculations about treatments, about medication. Again, this is a little bit, of course, a bit more clinical, but then there's a lot of speculation on, hydroxychloroquine and then, some kind of plasma therapy. What is your experience with, are these working, or should we feel positive, or, social distancing is the only way we can protect ourselves right now?
So that is again taking me back to what I said earlier, that these questions crop up rather than doing what you're supposed to do. So this is WhatsApp University for you. This is some journalist who's being overzealous in reporting stuff, which the common people honestly don't really have much knowledge to follow. And by reporting and bringing to the media, it creates a lot of anxiety unnecessarily. These are debates and questions which doctors do to each other, the scientific community does to each other. And these articles, honestly, in the mass media don't really serve much purpose. But since you've asked me, I'll try to provide clarity upon it. So HCQS, hydroxychloroquine, is an age-old drug. Remember, in allopathy science, whatever is age-old, like aspirin, for example, for paracetamol, for example, if they are here for centuries at an end, then they are already tried and tested and used and reused, and we know everything about them. So HCQS, honestly, for India, was always a wonder drug. The Western world just tried to taint it because they didn't do much about it. It's a safe drug. We have been using it for prevention for this virus. Again, when I say that, remember the experience is only for the last 6 months. In another 6 months, my statements and the scientific world statement can be absolutely topsy turvy, and we end up saying that whatever drugs we've used so far have all changed and new ones have come in, because the virus is evolving, mutating. Our knowledge about the virus is also ever expanding. But whatever we have in hand so far, so it's definitely working for prevention, especially. Plasma therapy is a kind of concept where, so for example, if I develop COVID-19 and for some reason I overcome the infection and I develop immunity towards it. So somewhere in a couple of questions prior, I told you about antibodies, which are immunoglobulins. That means my blood has good amount of antibodies to fight the virus. So when somebody is allowed to draw my blood and pack it up in a bag and remove plasma from the blood, that plasma is rich in antibodies towards COVID-19, and that at times can be given to certain patients who require that antibody towards the virus. Having said that, it's full of risks and pros and cons. Like a blood transfusion, we have to really weigh every pro and con, and every case is individual. It really can't be used as therapy for everybody. It's the patient in front of you, where if a doctor feels plasma therapy is essential, then we'll do it. Otherwise, it also comes with its own sort of side effects and other problems, complications.
Sure, note. So there's also another term called as herd immunity, which has been talked about a lot, and people are saying कि यार अभी कुछ नहीं होने वाला, let's all get infected and get herd immunity, and so there is a lot of confusion with regards to that. So, what would you like to say on that?
Right. So, as I said right in the beginning, the common cold virus affecting the caveman. So the caveman must have got exposed to common cold in some way or the other, and it must have taken an unfortunate mortality, morbidity with it. Then, when 70% of the world population gets infected with that particular virus, I'm not talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about every respiratory or airborne virus there is, then a concept of herd immunity develops, which basically means, let's cut it down to say 10 people. So in 10 people, if 7 people have acquired COVID-19 and they have survived and overcome COVID-19, that means they have now antibodies, and they have now sort of ability, immunity towards COVID-19. So when the remaining three people who are in that group, when they are intermingling with these seven people, they develop what is known as the concept of herd immunity. That means that they get from these seven people those kind of sort of subtle infections or immunity from the rest of the seven. Where so these three will get a very subtle picture of the infection and quickly recover from it, and they also develop immunity. So herd immunity is a concept where humans, because we live as a herd is a word used for group of animals actually, and end of the day humans are mammals. We are a kind of civilized society. So when we intermingle among each other and we pass on the immunity to each other, that is the concept of herd immunity. It develops, as I said, only when a point of 70% of population is infected, whether it's our states, our cities, our countries. So till we reach that 70%, any infection will take with it its unfortunate mortality and morbidity. But moment 70% of herd immunity is reached, then the other 35% can breathe easy, and then that's how the infection calms down.
So, I mean, so far it's not. Do we say that till the time we get hurt, will it work in this situation? Some you're saying if 70% of the population if gets infected and along with it having its toll of mortality and morbidity, then the herd immunity will actually set in. Till that such time, there we have to maintain all the social distancing and physical hand washing as well as wearing respiratory etiquette, etc. Um, so, sir, there is this one thing which we've noticed in the society where there's a lot of fear and anxiety. Say probably, unfortunately, if a person has been tested positive, then the people are worried and people treat him like somebody who is really a dangerous person. So they will not at all want to speak with him or talk to him or even just kind of not really entertaining him even if he needs anything. Or for that matter, we've seen some cases in the social media where healthcare professionals, because they are working with these patients, they are getting treated with differently, or in a, if I may use the word discriminated, yeah, tumko ho gaya, aap humko de doge, and there's a lot of fear and anxiety about treatment of these patients. By treatment, I mean social treatment. So, is this a correct way or to deal with this, or how can we change this? What's your take on this?
Very relevant question. As an individual, honestly, it boils my blood to hear this and to live with this. I think 21st century India, especially when I hear such situations, I feel we are still living in the 18th or the 19th century, where even sort of discrimination, casteism, ostracization was the norm of society. Sometimes I believe we are just a tie suit and booted Indians, but our hardcore values of social discrimination have still not gone. If we see the Western media and the Western world, they may have their own pros and cons, but at least discrimination is not there, especially in COVID-19 in the Western world. So where are we? I mean, I find it shameful when a doctor or a healthcare worker or even a COVID positive person is ostracized. It's social distancing, people. It's not social discrimination. If a doctor was known to spread infection, we would have been long dead. My father was a doctor. I wouldn't have been alive here and speaking to you if my father was carrying infections back home in his day. So doctors and healthcare workers don't really carry infections back home. In fact, even in the present times, the number of unfortunate mortalities in doctor community is 7 in the entire city of Bombay. So honestly, we don't really carry infection back home. We take care of ourselves. We've always told people what is to be done so that whatever we do, we spread the information to others so they can do the same and thereby keep infection under control. So the first loud and clear messages is that hospitals cure and treat infections. Hospitals do not spread infections. And that is not true for the last 6 months. That is true for the last 6 centuries, maybe that hospital in any part of the world is known to treat, not to spread. So remove that fear factor out from the system, please. Secondly, if a healthcare worker or a COVID positive person is in a society, please, other than the usual norms of hand washing and mask and social distancing, other than that, there is no discrimination required. He's not a single sole entity there spreading the infection in your locality. It can be within your house already and you may not even know it. So stop that mindset. That mindset is not healthy for you, not healthy for anybody around. One of the immunity lowering factors, by the way, is anxiety and fear. And where are we heading by just having a lot of anxiety and fear? You're decreasing your own immunity, and by doing that, you're increasing your own chances of acquiring COVID-19. So first get the fear and anxiety out. Follow the simple practices told to you, and that will ensure that you are safe, the society at large is safe. Things about positive immunity, positive well-being, happiness, smiling actually works. These are not theoretical things. These are scientifically proven things that the more positive and happy you are, the more you boost up your immunity. You release what is known as pheromone, which are happy chemicals in your brain. You remain happy yourself. You keep your family happy, and that's you keep the infection at control. So please practice this. Don't practice negative medicine.
Okay, thank you so much for that, sir. So, sir, there are other questions that we also are getting. Whether what should we do to increase our immunity? And we've got this different kind of things. Somebody saying some arsenic as an element if we include in our like a medication, or maybe we stock vitamin D3 and then have that, or maybe vitamin C tablets. Uh, a lot of different ideas in, as you said, from your WhatsApp community and so on. So how do we actually build our immunity, and are all of these supplements and all, are they really required?
Well, I don't need to answer that question. To answer that question, I would want every participant of this forum to for a minute close his eyes or her eyes and think about what was to happen in their own house and their parents' house and grandparents' house. So, whilst you're thinking, let me sort of give a commentary towards this. So, when a grandfather, grandmother is to enter the house in that time, is to first wash their hands and feet and then enter the house. At that time, our parents and grandparents used to walk a lot. Cars were not there much. They used to have daily sunshine exposure. They used to have their fruits on time. They used to eat on time, sleep on time. They were much happier and less stressed. They used to have their almond walnuts at time and their portion of salads and vegetables at time. That, ladies and gentlemen, is immunity for you, which is not what is learned from textbooks or from doctors or from WhatsApp. It's practiced in every single household. Unfortunately, we as 21st century people have given it up. It was there in my house, it is still there in any so many other people's houses. So if we follow this common and simple practice, immunity is not a rocket science or is not a secret. Immunity works on three simple principles: your stress factor, your exercise quotient, and your nutritional quotient. So if you de-stress every single day after you come home, have some meditation, have some relaxation techniques, have something which unwinds you at the end of the day. You have to find out your own secret to unwind. That's step number one. Couple that with a simple half an hour to 45 minutes of aerobic walk or aerobic exercise, which is step number two towards immunity. And lastly, nutrients. So whatever you're talking about tablets, what's wrong with natural supplements? Why do you want tablets for every single thing? If you squeeze half a lime for lunch and half a lime for dinner on your food, that's vitamin C for you. If you sit at least, if not every single day because of work pressures, if you sit in the sun for only on the weekends, 10 to 15 minutes on the weekends, that's vitamin D for you. If you have a glass of milk a day, that's calcium for you. If you have a seasonal fruit a day, that's B complex for you. If you have salads and vegetables, that's your minerals and proteins right there. What more do you need? So all of this put together is immunity for you. The day you start doing this, your immunity boosts up, and obviously these threats and infections are here to stay. It's Darwin's theory of law of survival. The virus wants to survive, we want to survive. So today it's COVID-19, it was H1N1 in around 10, 12 years ago. It will be another virus in the coming time. So as long as we keep our immunity up, we are going to be the supreme race here to stay.
Wow, that's a very nice take on this, and that answers a lot of speculations, lot of questions there. So we particularly work with a lot of employers or the human resource teams, basically employers, and we are dealing with questions like, how do they begin with their operations? Should they begin with their operations? How do they take care of the safety of their employees? Should they be calling comorbid patients, just like maybe a pregnant lady or an older age group employee? Should they just test all their employees before calling them, or How do they, in case there's a positive employee, then how do they do contact tracing, and then how do they quarantine the rest? And there are a lot of other these questions before they start operations. So can you throw some light on those questions as well?
Right. So idle mind is devil's workshop. I would sincerely wish that all offices start to work now, because the more we get back to our business and our work, we have something to think about, and that's that in a way is beneficial in the present time. Having said that, as I said in some time ago, where it's essential to step out and have a physical sort of work presence required, you do that. Otherwise, work from home is always an option in the present times. For the people who are going to come to the office, and for the employer, what are the remedies and measures he can keep ready is one, ensure a lot of sort of soap and water facilities are available. So fresh bars of soap at various different areas where people can really wash their hands regularly and very well. Number two, thermometer checks. So you have these infrared thermometers at the gates where a security or somebody can scan it on the forehead, and 99.5 in the summertime is defined as temperature and above. So if there is a temperature of 99.5 and above, then he needs to be referred to a doctor. By saying refer to a doctor, most of the corporates do have an in-house doctor, so the employees can, as of now, first counter check whether the in-house doctor is there and whether he's available. So he is the best first aid remedy, there right there in the hospital, in the corporate setup. If he feels, he can refer to a hospital or some other place. So, fourthly, when it comes to vulnerable subsets, pregnant ladies, elderly people, uncontrolled diabetic. I use the word uncontrolled diabetic, uncontrolled hypertensive, because a normally well-controlled diabetic or well-controlled blood pressure patient is not vulnerable. The uncontrolled ones are. So if the employer has such employees with him, it's best that they adhere to option like work from home, or at least get medical consultation for their medical problems like diabetes, BP. Control that first and then report to work. And lastly, mass testing is no longer advocated. If you see the corporation's guidelines, asymptomatic people are not to be tested. You can't have mass screenings at all, because honestly, that doesn't change anything. Remember, the testing kits are limited. We had quarantine. In fact, I would want to compliment the authorities for still maintaining the diagnostic kits. The factories were shut for a long time. Still, they could manufacture diagnostic kits locally, but we still have a limited number. We are a billion population country, and we may be having some thousands of or lakhs of kits. So we really can't test everybody. Those where it is required to be tested as a doctor's discretion, those should be tested. The others can just adhere to these social norms which are there at the present times, and that will keep you protected.
And so what about the employees, and what should be the measures that they should take care, especially if they find that they are a little symptomatic or are having some kind of symptoms?
So employees, clearly, again, each time, a couple of measures: wear the mask at all the times. Proper mask wearing technique matters, where your nose has to be covered. You can't let your nose hang loose outside the mask. That is defeating the purpose. So please pull your mask over the nose. I know it is difficult. We are not used to this new normal, but for the time at least, it is essential. Please do that. And remember, not every sore throat has to be infective. I see a lot of cases where the mask unfortunately is causing a lot of sore throat because it's a chemical, it's a synthetic material. So again, for that, rather than resorting to all these fancy synthetic masks, as the prime minister also had said sometime in the past, a simple cloth mask or a dupatta or a handkerchief, which at times is not chemical and will not cause a chemical irritation of the throat, is much more conducive to be used. But remember to cover the mouth and the nose. Then frequent hand washing. Each time you visit the washroom, each time you are wanting to eat your meals, you should have a 20-second hand wash. 20-second, by the way, is happy birthday song for you. So the moment you sing and hymn that happy birthday song in your mind, for you're finished 20 seconds by the time the song finishes. That is the time you should finish your hand wash. That's a clean 20-second hand wash. Then obviously sneezing in the corner of your mouth, coughing in the corner of your arm, sorry, or on the tissue, and disposing the tissue as soon as possible is the third thing to be kept in mind. Uh, what we've seen as doctors, where the maximum spread happens, is the mess halls or the canteens or the cafeterias, because that is the time you lower the mask and you eat, obviously. And then if you're socializing at that time and talking to people across the table, then the transmission is the highest. So try to keep sort of those areas of exposures the least. quickly have your lunch and leave. Don't really try to, at this present time, chit chat over there or try to have social distancing norms in the cafeteria. And lastly, at least in hospitals, what we're doing, because all of us today are understaffed, whether it's hospitals or corporate circles. So gone are the days where you'll wait for a person to come and clean your table and chair and your own surface areas. With a simple disinfectant, you should be decontaminating your own area at least. So do that at least 3 4 times in a day. So at least to know that your area is clean where you're working, and if everybody does his own little corner, then the entire office can function very healthy and very with all hygienic methods.
Sure, that's a different, very different angle to the whole housekeeping area of offices. But most of the frequently asked questions are almost over. This is one question which probably have like a personal thing. What about kids and children? Now because they get a lot of uh, irritable, cranky. They cannot meet their friends. They cannot go out to play. Schools are shut. What about then how to manage children, especially in these times? Should we allow them to play outside or, with masks, without masks? Because they tend to get irritated, remove it. How do we handle that situation?
Right. So first, about the concern, let me give a global statistic here, which also is applicable for our country. Luckily for all of us, the worldwide incidence of pediatric uh,
Hello?
can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we lost you
Okay, sorry.
10 seconds.
So I was saying that the global prevalence of affection, when I say affection, infection in children in a pediatric age group is just 0.3%. And amongst those 0.3%, there is unfortunate mortality. So imagine how less the figure is. So somehow the virus has not really been affecting the pediatric age group. That's being thankful, merciful about it. Having said that, we should not be then leaving our guard down. The children have to be told about the good measures of hand washing, vitamin C, fresh fruit and vegetables, and sunlight and all that. As the government announces lockdown, it's important right now to listen to the civic administration, because they are making rules for you and me and for our own benefit. So when they announce children have to venture out, they have to venture out then. You and me can't really, allow them to go out now when the norms are not there. And whenever they do, whether it's for schooling or socializing or to play downstairs, it's with these measures in mind where the mask has to be pulled up and hand washing is a norm and blah blah blah. But that's about it all. Till that time, I think in the house they can be, kept up with studies and some board games and some activities which can which can sort of make them a little occupied. I know it's trying time for them as well, but it's essential to be a little safe indoors presently.
Sure. Thank you so much for such an insightful session, sir. I would just check if there are some more questions in the Q&A section, and
Sure.
we can probably. So there are a few questions. So the first one is, how can a diabetic person take care of himself or to protect him from the virus?
So diabetic has to really, really put in exercise. I am very strongly of the belief that in our country, problems like diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, overweight are hardly because of diet. Most of us, all of us, really have a very sensible diet. So Indians per se, all of us are very diet conscious community. But whether we like it or no, we are a exercise lethargic community. Thereby, in our people, every medical problem like BP, sugars, cholesterol is because of lack of exercise. So, in spite of the lockdown, people who have facilities like a stationary bike or a treadmill can use those in the house. People who do not can at least start walking within the confines of their home. So, regular walks, when I say I mean regular walks, just not moving from hall to bedroom and bedroom to kitchen just for a bit is not really exercise. Getting your steps right, walking for those amount of time is what a diabetic can do to control his sugar. Secondly, taking medicines on time. These are also the times where sometimes the chemists run out of stock of their medicines because the supply chain is disrupted. So ordering your medicines before they really finish, so having a sufficient stock is important, and taking them on time is important. Thirdly, luckily for diabetes, teleconsultation is a boon because for a diabetic, especially a lot of my diabetics are resorting to teleconsultation now because for them it's easy just to call up, mention the sugars, the latest sugars, and sort of take the medicines on time. At this point, let me also say, just like I mentioned a little while earlier, calling the lab technician home to get your blood sampled is not a risk factor at all because he's a single person coming home. He's going to wear a mask. You're going to wear a mask. You can wash your hands when he leaves, and you can obviously open the windows when he comes in, so ventilation in the house is well maintained. So in other words, don't be paranoid about the fact that you don't really need to get anybody home for blood collections. And lastly, if at all you have to visit the hospital, do that. As I said a couple of questions before, hospital don't spread infections. If you're required to see your doctor, please go using all the measures in mind. When you come back, obviously wash your clothes, have a clean bath, wear a mask when you're outside. So these are a couple of tips for diabetics and for every patient for that matter.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next question says whether homeopathic medicines, just like I asked, like arsenic album, which is just on the rounds, is it effective? Is it not effective in prevention?
Unfortunately, not my area of expertise. A homeopath would obviously be in a better position to answer this question. I do not know. It's a very honest answer because I have not studied the molecule. Having said that, will I take it personally? No, because I would rather resort to natural remedies to boost my immunity. It's like any medicine, isn't it? I mean, tomorrow I can give you an allopathy pill to boost up the immunity. The question is, how long can you take it, and then what happens? Is the medicine going to have side effects, and then how do you deal with it? So rather than, because these are sort of ubiquitous question for every medicine. I'm not saying homeopathy or allopathy. Every medicine you pop in your mouth is going to have these questions at large. So whatever I mentioned about immunity, the natural remedies, the exercise quotient, the nutrition, the stress reduction are actually much more beneficial for a healthy lifestyle, COVID or not. I would rather resort to those.
All right, thank you, sir. Someone's asked, is COVID-19 an airborne disease? Like, if no one's around me, can I just remove my mask or ride a two-wheeler without a mask, or maybe exercise in an open area without a mask if no one's around me?
So at home, honestly, mask not really essential. You can definitely lower the mask in the privacy of house because you know your family members. If obviously anybody is sick and having fever amongst them, then you need to obviously wear a mask in the house. But otherwise, you don't need to. If everybody around you is fit and healthy, and if you're alone, even more so reason to not wear the mask. Yeah, when you're outside, especially on a two-wheeler, it's prudent to wear a mask because you really don't know. You can't really sort of know when the infection is around. There was a good study which has shown that why Japan didn't have too much of COVID-19, and one of the pointers were Japanese were always in the sort of the process of wearing a mask for many years now. Whenever they ventured outside their home, so mask I think definitely is a useful thing to wear, and exercising, gymming. Well, if it's again, as I said, in the house environment, you can do it with the mask lowered. If it's a community gym or a social area, you should obviously do it with the mask pulled on. Having said that, remember with the mask at times, especially while exercising, you tend to become a lot more breathless because it's like a contained air you're breathing, not the open air outside. So be a little careful when you're doing that. Take small breaks in between, get your breath back, and again start exercising.
All right. People are asking if kids or adults even exercising or cycling in the society without a mask, is that okay?
No, no. As I said, outside the house, it's best to wear a mask. So that is one social norm which has to be reiterated. The society office bearers have to ensure that people outside can obviously now with the lockdown gradually getting eased up. Again, I would say rather than me as a doctor or you as a layperson to decide these, let the civic authorities guide us whether we can venture out and have these activities. But whenever we are allowed to do so, also we should remember our civic responsibility, and one of the civic responsibility is to obviously wear a mask to protect yourself and to protect the fellow being next to you as well.
So, there's a question where someone's asking if do you have to take some special care if your child has suffered from adenoids or tonsils or some other respiratory
No,
problem?
not really. It's like, so let me answer that question by saying, by having tonsils or adenoid, does your chances of COVID-19 increase? No. Having said that, having once COVID-19, it's like dengue fever. We have asked it very frequently that once infected, do you not get infected again? Again, that is not true. Subsequent infections are also possible. Also, having said that, it's true that for certain viruses, once we are infected, our body has also developed what is known as a memory immunity. So the next infection then tends to be lesser than the first, because the moment even a single virus enters the body, the memory immunity can quickly attack and curtail it. That's how it is.
There's a question or rather couple of questions on asthmatic patients, like are they at a higher risk in should they be going out in this time, or if they should be going out, and what are the other precautions, because wearing masks sometimes they feel uncomfortable or breathless, difficulty in breathing. So
Yeah, very relevant question, because as I said right in the beginning, these are respiratory viruses. Their target organ of damage is the lungs, and unfortunately, in asthmatic or a COPD or bronchitis patient, for him to begin with, the lungs are a little compromised. So they have to be extra cautious in these days. For them, it's essential that they sort of remain home till it's safe to venture out. Secondly, they should be in regular touch with their respiratory physician, and be sort of consulting them regarding their revision of their dosages, what has to be done, especially up and down the dosages in these times. Thirdly, especially for asthmatic, we advocate annual vaccinations. So don't forget to take your vaccinations on time, especially for this year and subsequent years. So at least the other infections you ward off by having your flu jabs or your influenza vaccines also. So don't forget to do those. And lastly, for lungs, your remedies such as your breathing exercises, some pranayam, some yogas are very beneficial. Do those so your lung capacity remains good and healthy.
all right, I think that's about the questions that we have gotten so far. Thank you so much for all the patient responses. So, just for the benefit of the audience, to summarize, the key takeaways from these sessions were basically ensure that you maintain all the civic responsibility, maintain your social distancing to protect yourself, proper hand washing techniques, and cuffing etiquette. Maintain all of these for preventing yourself. For your building your immunity, you do not have to actually go out and for artificial means. You can always go out for natural stuff, the natural food, nutrition, sunlight, more exercise, and be happy and positive, and not really given to fear and anxiety about the infection. Ensure that you notice the red flags as mentioned by doctors, and do utilize teleconsultations and telemedicine services during these times, especially to be on a safer side, and to be really quickly getting healthcare and medical response. And for employers and employees, as far as possible, avoid give work from home to your employees. And if you really have to go to the office, and ask your employees to come back, take care of all the disinfecting, infection measures, social distancing, again hand washing, coughing etiquette, and ensure that shared spaces like cafeterias are used minimally, and do spaces that we are using. So I think that those are some of the key takeaways from the session, and it was thank you, Dr. Saraf. It was a very insightful session, and it answered most of the frequently asked questions, and we're glad to have you. It's our pleasure, and
Thank you.
thank you all the audience and participants. You've been lovely in your interaction. So thank you so much for participating. Have a good day and stay safe. Thank you again.